Good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Eye on Dependency once again. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And of course, our guests are back with us in studio this afternoon. Good afternoon, Vanessa.
Good afternoon, Garth.
Thank you for being here. Of course, Dr. Pottinger and Professor Hutchinson. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And of course, Mr. Hines will be here with us. If he can't make it, well, you know, the show must go on, as they say. Natasha will join us in a couple of minutes. Now, let's jump right in, people, because I am sure, as last week, we would have a lot more to share with you. And of course, in wrapping up this discussion for this week, of course, is something that we will keep on the front burner. And of course, as I said, we will try our best to have the politician get involved in the conversation. We start with Dr. Winston Dukaran, whom I saw on the news recently discussing the same issue. And for to jumpstart the discussion, I like Professor Hutchinson at first if we could respond to what I just read with the establishment of this facility in Jamaica. Tell us what you think, Doc, and how, Professor, and if we could see this happening here in our University of the West Indies.
Okay, good afternoon again, Garth, and good afternoon to all the listeners. The idea, I think, has been in Jamaica for a long time. As we discussed last week, one of our teachers, Professor West, who is a pharmacologist, had initiated research into the positive effects of cannabis in the treatment of glaucoma, and this would be more than 20 years ago. So I think that this is a welcome development, because I think, as we've been discussing, there really needs to be a greater attempt to identify whether or how cannabis can be used in medicine, how cannabis can be used to challenge some of the myths that have been created around it, and how we as in the Caribbean, as a Caribbean people, can take advantage of its presence as against demonizing it and having it cast out when there are so many potential benefits.
About the psychological part, because medical marijuana cannot induce, or if some people would fear that it would induce psychosis, as some people would suffer, as you mentioned last week about young people being in St. Anne's. Would medical marijuana induce psychosis in any way?
Well, again, this is why research is important, because what the research would do would be to identify the active ingredients that would have the positive medical benefits, while at the same time minimizing the negative effects. I think another important point that we raised last week was the whole idea of smoking marijuana. And smoking in general is a bad thing. It damages your lungs, it affects your nasal passages, and I think finding a way to use medical marijuana that is less toxic, I think is one of would be one of the thrusts of the research. I think also that, as with everything else, people develop allergic reactions. People sometimes develop responses to drugs that cause more harm than good. And again, this is a feature of anything that you ingest. So that the whole point of research is to try to identify ways in which those negative effects on those people who may respond to it in negative ways can be minimized, and to identify, if possible, perhaps through genetic means, which individuals might in fact have negative reactions to it. But I think the whole idea of medical marijuana is to find the most acceptable route and the most acceptable form that it can take to be ingested. And as we well know, some states in the United States and in Canada have already made great leaps in producing medical marijuana, and continue to do so as they've recognized and acknowledged the benefits of the drug in that context.
No. Yes, doctor.
Yeah, with respect to the... Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, with respect to the question I just asked Prof. Hutchinson about psychosis. Plenty evidence is coming out now. You played a clip last week. They were mentioning that CBD is now found to be protective against psychosis. So I went and looked it up, right? So there's an elegant study out of Cologne in Germany where they had people who were diagnosed schizophrenic, and they compared the two drugs. They were treating them with CBD, which is one of the cannabinoids, right? Along with the state-of-the-art antipsychotic medication, and the end result is that it was equally effective in controlling the psychosis, but far less toxic, because the most, as Prof could tell you better than me, that a lot of these drugs cause plenty of problems. They cause problem with muscle contraction, spasm, and increased weight, and certain other problems, none of which the CBD cause. So in terms of the treatment of psychosis, I think marijuana, there's a big future ahead, because right now the Germans are trying to make a drug specifically with the CBD. So what will eventually happen, just like with the Sativex is a drug which was licensed now for the treatment of multiple sclerosis. A British company is making it, and everybody now know the benefits and the amount of money that can be made from this. So they have actually made a spray, a tincture that you can spray in your mouth, all right, and it absorbs straight into the bloodstream to treat multiple sclerosis. It was very effective, and that has THC along with CBD inside of it. The thing is $190 for about 10 days supply. So I was doing some of the maths, you see. So in England, the UK is estimated to be about 80,000 multiple sclerosis sufferers, and if it's $190 for 10 days supplies, actually it works out to be $5.7 billion for 1 year. Now you see where we're going, all right? And if people could grow this thing, and the tincture is easy to make, because the same formula, last week I was mentioning about an Irish doctor who was working in India about 250 years ago. It's the O'Shaughnessy, and it's the same formula that he had to extract the thing from, then they're using. So if people could use this, there's one estimate that the same $190 worth for the 10 days could cost about $8.
Okay, but Professor, before I cross back to Dr. Pottinger, no, that's starting. That's some really interesting stats.
That's revenue coming into a Caribbean island.
Yes, yeah.
No, but we won't get it, because you see, like we mentioned last week, by the time we get moving, all of those countries we're ahead, and these things are being patented. And if you have a synthetic medication that have the THC and have the CBD, and you don't have to smoke it, you just spray it, or you inhale it, or take it in a tablet form, I mean, we are dead.
Professor, you being a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, is there anything at all, any discussion going on at your level, at the University of the West Indies level, concerning this? To do a study, to do anything?
Yes, there is the neurophysiologists and the biochemists are beginning to talk more seriously about it. Now, I think we also have to look at this in the wider context of what used to be called bush medicine in previous years, because now under the umbrella of alternative medicine, that same herbal medicine, as it's being called now, as Dr. Pottinger was just saying, is huge business, and many of these herbal medicines are derivatives of herbs and plants that we know. So I think that the issue really is for the scientific community, and as they're doing in Jamaica, to amplify their efforts to attempt to develop compounds that can be used for the relief of many of the serious health problems we have, in a way that would be cost effective and also utilize the botanical range that we already possess. Because one of the big things with cannabis or marijuana is how easily it grows, and it's unclear again why that is so, but it grows extremely easily. So therefore, cultivating it, and which is why cultivating it is so popular. So I think that one of the advantages of decriminalization / legalization would be that, in terms of being able to use it for science to break it down and identify the metabolites that can be useful in our context.
Would we see an institute set up at UE for research anytime soon?
Well, again, I think that the wider social forces are probably still not at that stage to sanction that. And I think, as Dr. Pottinger said, because the rest of I think they will wait, as in many other things, they will wait for it to be set up and organized in the rest of the world before they're willing to give it the kind of support that it needs. So we can hope, I think, if the Jamaica Center comes on board, as Dr. Chang and Dr. Lowe are trying to initiate, then it could be the jumpstart for other areas in the Caribbean. So as I said, even for herbal medicine, the support has not been as forthcoming as one would have liked. And I think in that same way, I think that the support for cannabis, because of all the controversies associated with it, I think would also be slow in coming.
I want Doc to record all these questions, because I want to ask this question now: would the medical fraternity not support this? No, that's no, Doc. With the medical, because if I'm a doctor and I am dispensing a quote unquote wonder drug to people who must pay $1,000 a shot for it every month, or $500 a week for it, and then here comes whoops, this wonder drug now to take over ours that could take away from my coffers. How would that go down?
Well, you see, again, medicine is in terms of dollars and cents, is obviously a business, and that business is run not just by doctors but by pharmaceutical companies.
There you go.
And the pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars of profit from the sale of pharmaceuticals around the world. So there will be a battle there to establish control of production. And again, in our history, as we well know, we have not been particularly good at owning production of the things that are indigenous to us. So as I said, while not wanting to sound too cynical, I think that the challenge that we face will be difficult to overcome in terms of becoming a source or a mass producer of the derivatives of cannabis.
Dr. Pottinger?
I think that nowadays everybody try to practice evidence-based medicine. So I would think that if there is good evidence with respect to the safety and efficacy in treating certain things, I think the average doctor would buy into it.
Really?
Yes. So you see, right now, a lot of the things that we've been talking about since last week is what we call anecdotal. Now, somebody said to me that we should explain what anecdotal mean, because a lot of the listening public might not know. Anecdotal mean I come and give testimony. So I have a cancer on my nose and I rub it with cannabis oil, and after 3 weeks the cancer disappear. So that is anecdotal evidence, right? Because I don't know, somebody, I'd have to ask, oh, you know it was a cancer. Was it biopsy? Did the pathologist say it was a cancer? If it was a cancer, was it, what type of cancer? You have many different type of kin's cancer. Was it melanoma? Was it a basal cell carcinoma? Was it a squamous cell cancer? You understand me? Then the next question will be asked, oh, you know your immune system didn't spontaneously clear it as opposed to the oil you put in on it clear. You understand what I'm saying? So when I come and get a testimony, it's not medical evidence per se. It's just
not
like
scientific.
Yes. So you see, we have to always come back to, you have to control so that people don't come and be skeptical about this, because especially with the treatment of cancer, like a fellow called in last week and was saying that the guy from Canada is curing stage 4 cancer that the doctors give up on. Now when I hear things like that, I mean, I have to be very skeptical, because I deal with this disease and I know it's a very unforgiving thing, and any stage 4 cancer is almost impossible to cure. So when somebody come and say, well, then you use cannabis oil and eat it and you're curing this, that is like a religion. You're going to have to just have faith and believe it. Yeah. So most doctors will not believe that. So you have to come with good evidence when show, all right, yes, we set up this study, we have breast cancer, cervical cancer, so we have some people who are going to treat with chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and some people we have a standardized regime so that the people get in the right dosage, and so, and then you follow them over a time period, and we see that if it is as equal to the chemotherapy, so say it equal to the chemotherapy and much less side effect, then something like that, now you could start to advocate moving away from the chemo for the treatment of this particular cancer and go to the cannabis. So that is not tomorrow or next year, you know. I mean, we're looking at probably 10-20 years in the future if we start right now to get the full medical evidence to buy over all the skeptics.
No, why would it take so long? Is it the pharmaceutical, the companies?
Well, with cancer it will take long, because you see, cancer is a rare disease, so you need to get good numbers to work out what you call power calculations. You can't just use 10 and then extrapolate it to 1,000,000, right? So you need a good sample size. So if you are for a rare thing, you're going to take a while to accrue a good sample size. Then with cancers, the recurrence can be 10 years or 15 years. So the follow-up will have to be good. It's not something you're going to do in 2 years and then say, hey, yes, we have a cure for this thing. Because next thing you know, 4 or 5 years, you get a recurrence. So what you think you're curing, you're not really curing. You understand? So with respect to cancer, it will be a long process. With respect to things like pain is so bad. Because if you have some kind of pain, some kind of neuropathic pain, that the morphine or whatever else we're using right now not working, and you're getting all kind of bad, you know, effect, pins and needle sensation, and you can't sleep and things, and so it is relative. I think most doctors will find it much easier to say, let's try cannabis, because we're trying everything already and the person miserable and not helping, and we try the cannabis, because if the cannabis work, good. If it don't work, right, we don't have no big side effects, because we don't establish already, you know, have no really toxic dosage of marijuana. You wouldn't left with any big side effect. But if you do that to somebody who have a early stage cancer like a cervical cancer, which 100% curable if treated properly, right, I'd find it very difficult to tell that person, let's try cannabis oil. You understand the point I'm saying? So it will vary at depending on what you're treating. Say for instance, we know that marijuana are very good in treating seizure disorders, and like the example you were saying earlier, the Sifra with that Sanjay Gupta was talking about,
the 6-year-old girl.
Yes, this girl who having 300 seizures a week or something like that. I mean, that must be distressing to the parents and everybody else, and she was on like 6-7 drugs, all of the drugs that we normally use, no Tegretol and, you know, Dilantin and whatever else, and still having that many seizures. And when she started to use the CBD, right, out of the cannabis, it reached down to 2 or 3 per month. I think, you know, that would be much easier to reproduce. I think we just get epileptics, which we have plenty, and plenty of them on medication already. That would be a relatively easy experiment to do.
Well, you know, it's when we come, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to throw 2 questions at both of you, and then I know you have a lot to share with us again this afternoon, Doc. So if you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Iron Dependency, and with Dr. Pottinger and Dr. Professor Gerard Hutchinson, and we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Stay right there.
Have you ever paid a bribe to a judge or court official?
Okay, welcome back to Our Independency, and thank you for staying with us. And of course, I forgot to thank Short Pants, Pelham and Ming for doing a really fine job this afternoon. So reach home safe, guys. Now we're back in studio again. Natasha has joined us, and we're speaking with Professor Gerard Hutchinson and Dr. Pottinger. Now, Professor, before I ask Dr. Pottinger to share some of that information you were sharing with us off mic here a while ago, and of course I'm sure Natasha would have her questions. You spoke about the young men in St. Anne's who've been admitted for psychosis. Let's deal with that a bit, because it's a fear by some folks that once we decriminalize, we're going to make a lot of young people go and use marijuana and go mad. Now, let's talk about those guys in St. Anne's, for instance. Is there any reversal of their condition right now, and how do we counteract what they're experiencing right now?
Well, the research suggests that there are two major factors that influence cannabis leading to psychosis. One is early use, so that people start using extremely early, as in around puberty, 11, 12, 13, and heavy prolonged use. So if you start using early and then you use a lot over a lengthy period, the risk of you developing psychosis is much higher. So I think that really is an issue related to regulation.
Could you explain psychosis to those who don't understand what it is?
Okay, so psychosis is a kind of mental disturbance where the person loses touch with reality. And we are in touch with reality on one hand through our senses, which picks up information from the environment and from within us as well. That information is then passed to the brain, and then the brain makes sense of that information. So people who are psychotic have sensory abnormalities, so they might feel or hear or see things that are not there. And when that information gets to the brain interprets it in a way that makes them overly suspicious, or they might believe that people are against them, or that people are talking about them, or that they have some great powers. And these beliefs now lead them to act in ways that to the observer would make them realize that something is wrong. So for example, they might attack somebody else who's walking down the street because they hear a voice telling them that that person is trying to kill them. So that action, of course, cannot be explained because the person is just walking down the road. And this is an illustration of how psychosis can affect an individual. And of course, this applies across the board. They might not want to eat because they feel they're being poisoned, or they might stop talking to their family because they feel their family somehow is plotting to harm them in some way. So it can be very disruptive, and invariably would lead people to be admitted to St. Anne's Hospital, because there's no way that even counseling at that stage would help them. They would need more aggressive treatment, and then as they improve, counseling could come in.
But it can be reversed.
But it can be reversed, certainly. And the issue really is, and again it comes back to the issue of regulation. One is how much cannabis or how much THC they're taking in, whether that THC is contaminated in any way, and that contamination could come from even the fertilizers and the chemicals that are used to ensure high yields of the crops, and also whether they individually are sensitive to it. And it does seem that there are some people, a minority of people, but there are some people who are particularly sensitive to the effects of THC. And whether this is a genetic thing, whether it is something that is related to the kind of environment they grew up in, or a combination of the two, that certainly is the case. The third important factor is that the social circumstances of the person. So for example, if they have a parent who's mentally ill as well, or if they are in a dysfunctional social environment, a chaotic environment, an environment where their needs are not being met, their nutritional needs, their support needs are not being met, then if you put that together with heavy use and early use, then again the risk of a breakdown is much higher, to the extent where some people feel that it is not so much the cannabis, but the cannabis acts as a kind of it amplifies the vulnerability. So it's not really the cause of the problem, but these people are vulnerable, and the use of the cannabis just pushes them over the edge. And if we were to remove the vulnerability, the cannabis would not be a problem. But it's difficult to separate the two things, because of course you can't just completely remove someone from the environment that they've grown up in or that they've been exposed to and remove the effects of having grown up in that environment very easily. So it does call for a greater social intervention, and as I said, a greater regulation of the kind of THC that they're being exposed to.
No, Prof just said a mouthful, right? So for the layman out there, the psychosis is what we call real madness. Alright? And then you have a group of things what we call neuroses, right? Which is not real madness, you know, that you probably can counsel out some of that.
That's
but
well,
Prof is a better man to do it, right?
Right.
But you can counsel out that. But if somebody really having a psychotic episode, like, you can't counsel it away. It really that need medication, because is a brain neurotransmitter problem. Now the point about young brain is very important, because this effect of THC probably to bring on something that the person predisposed to genetically, it tend to go away by the time the brain mature at about mid-20s, right, Hutch?
Correct.
Yeah. So it is people who start young and using it. So say somebody in their 20s and things, and so really you will see somebody who start after the brain matures. Say from 21 going down, will have this kind of effect. Then, as we were saying last week on the clip from the BBC and what I said earlier about the study from Cologne, probably the people who taking the THC in a strain that don't have plenty CBD, right, then they will more of a problem, because you see the CBD is now being shown to be a very potent drug for treating psychosis. So if you smoking some weed where they breed out the CBD, right, because that is trash, then we want the high, right, and you increase your THC, like what some of these very potent strains from California, that probably might be much more potent in causing some form of psychosis. Now Dr. Hutch, I want to ask you something. If somebody come and say they were talking to Jesus in their room this morning, right, and Jesus answering them back, so they're seeing Jesus and they're hearing Jesus. Now, auditory hallucination mean hearing things like the voice tell you to chop up the man because the man might want to do you harm, or if you're seeing something, a snake or something, you turn over and your wife look like a snake, you might grab a knife and start to snap the snake to death. Alright, so if you're seeing something, visual hallucination, and hearing something, auditory hallucination. So like last week a man I tell me so well, and him talk to Jesus every morning in him room. What you think about that?
That's a very interesting question, because religion or religious behavior, some people would argue, is psychotic behavior. Because if you talk to God, and many people who have psychotic illnesses will tell you that they are talking to God,
Get an answer.
and God then answers them and directs them. The simple answer, but by no means the complete answer, is it relates to function. So the person who does that but is still able to function and is still able to maintain that function, so that their family, the people observing them, the people who they work with or who they study with, can say that their behavior has not deteriorated to a point where they cannot function, these experiences in a sense are allowable. And in fact, a study in England showed that up to 40% of the population hears voices or has heard voices at some point or another. So it means that the brain has that capacity, and I always liken it to dreaming. When we are asleep and dreaming, it seems real. So in other words, the brain has the capacity to generate, if you will, an alternative reality that can seem quite real, except of course we know when we wake up that we were dreaming. But the experience is so real that if we fighting, you might get up feeling tired or get up sweating, or so this is like a simulation of reality. So the brain has that capacity, and it seems that in many people it does do that. But in the people who become ill, it does it in a way that interferes with their ability to function effectively or to participate in their day-to-day activities in a way that would